Sadistic Penguin Studios presents the At the Show podcast with Tom Yumper Garcia.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
And Tony Tulsa Burt.
I don't know this industry jargon, YP, MP, whatever, okay? All I know is that I cannot get a record contract. We cannot get a record contract unless I take these tapes.
It's almost time, so grab a drink, get your popcorn ready, and join the film discussion with two guys from Chicago talking movies.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the At the Show podcast, presented to you by the Sadistic Penguin Studios. I'm one of your co-hosts, Tom Yumpa Garcia, and I'm with my other co-host, Tony the Sugar Baggy Burt. How you doing, my man?
Doing good tonight. Excited for our topic. Excited to be here. Excited work's done. So glad to be here.
As am I. We have one of your favorite films we're going to be discussing tonight, along with a bunch of other tomfoolery that goes along with this show. Tone, how was your week, man?
How was my week? Oh, it was a very, very, very long week. Too long. And this is pretty much the cherry on top of a very long week, which cherries are usually good. So that's why I'm excited always to do this show, because always before coming on this show, I look in the mirror, I'm like, I made it to this point. And then it's like, this is it right here. The show. This is, if I could make it through this show, I had a successful week. I do. Minus maybe some internet issues every now and
then. Yeah, when I see you get stuck and I'm like, oh, I got to keep going.
That's it.
But it's going to be a fun one. We got a lot of cool stuff going to happen tonight within our little stream, which is probably going to be a long one because this is probably the most notes I've written for movie that we've had and God knows how long. Usually I'm like around 25 to 30 pages. This is a 40-page note thing, so maybe it'll be long, maybe it won't be long. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, we'll have to see. Let's keep the train on the tracks.
I am in misery watching this. I'm sorry, Sam. I don't know what to tell you, man. I just
Wow. Wow.
But let's get into our first segment, Tone. Let's go into what we've been watching this week.
Let's do it.
That's a me. And also, what were you just watching?
So what you been watching this week, my man?
Two different things I've been watching. First off, I've been watched this movie. I've watched it a lot. Always watch it for a good time, for some laughs. It's an 80s comedy. It's called Loverboy. It stars Patrick Dempsey. But also along with Patrick Dempsey in this movie is Kirstie Alley and Carrie Fisher. It is about, pretty much the story is, a gentleman who is going to college and parties too much, and his parents don't want to fund his college anymore. So he comes back home and starts delivering pizzas until he sees another pizza delivery driver who kind of starts this kind of side business, wooing women by delivering pizzas. And the women ask for extra anchovies, and that means that, you know, it's all in like an American Pie type of format. It's not like really like dirty or anything like that. Carrie Fisher plays one of the females, Kirstie Alley, and what ends up happening is these females' husbands start chasing after him. He's trying to keep it from his parents. He's trying to keep it from his girlfriend. It's just really hilarious. And Patrick Dempsey stars in it too. I think I mentioned that already. Who again, it's going to lead into my second thing because he's in the new Dexter season, and that's what brought me to watching this. But have you ever seen Loverboy? Yep.
A long time ago. It's kind of like it's got the Night Shift feels to it.
A little bit.
With Michael Keaton.
One thing I wanted to bring up that I think that you'll enjoy here, that I got a little clip is I've always loved the 80s movie intros like this. Bring back the cartoons in the beginning of movies that like spell out the people's names, and it was really creative. That's how the movie starts. And if you like, again, those '80s kind of comedies, it's right up that alley.
Yeah, definitely one of those. Definitely 80s.
And besides that, I watched the new season of Dexter. Been watching that. It's 7 episodes in. I've watched everything Dexter, and I gotta say I'm a big fan of this new series that they have out. Is a prequel. It is Dexter right when he starts the FBI, and it has Patrick Dempsey in an amazing role as the police chief. But who plays Dexter's dad in the original was James Remar. In this one, it is Christian Slater, who I am always on board for anything that Christian Slater is in, and he does a great job as his father, Harry. But again, it is a early look back to the Dexter that if you are a fan of the show, the original, this is kind of a prequel to lead into, I guess, the original Dexter is coming back this summer, which is crazy because I thought he was dead. But we will see how that will be going. But check out the new show if you do have an opportunity.
I have never watched Dexter.
Now, what's cool about Dexter is like each season, especially from the original show, is like its own separate little story. You know what I mean? And like, what's cool about Dexter, just really quick, is like he's kind of like a superhero in his own way because like he kills killers. So like that's his thing, is like he kills a killer, but like you can't kill a killer. That doesn't make you a good person either, but it's because he's got to hide that fact of him. And it's always been inside of him because when he was young, he saw his mom sadly murdered by like a Colombian drug gang. So like he has always had this vision of death in his head. But his stepfather, Christian Slater, teaches him to use it kind of in a more of a proper way. And it's a really good show, honestly. If you enjoy cool, John Lithgow is in one season, and you know how much I love John Lithgow. So check it out there if you have a chance. But it looks like we got some more anime up here, Yump. What have you been watching?
Yeah, I for one, is my mic a little louder?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I had to raise up the volume a little bit. I noticed that the is for some reason being adjusted by something else. But technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. But I have fallen into the rabbit hole known as anime. I was looking for something a little bit different that wasn't samurai or martial arts related, even though this is kind of have a little bit martial arts in it. I've been watching Hellsing Ultimate, which I've only got through the first 3 episodes. I believe there's 13 altogether, and they're hour long each. It's a really, really interesting concept about this group called Hellsing that is basically a playoff, Van Helsing. This girl has actually a vampire that is passed down through her family, a very, very powerful vampire that goes out and hunts other vampires to keep the world safe. And they're actually fighting right now against the Vatican. And this is based in England. They're fighting against the Vatican in Ireland that is trying to wipe them all out because they're trying to be goody two shoe Catholics. And they're Protestants, which is kind of funny, but it's got a lot of action, a lot of blood, some comedy in it. The illustrations on it are just awesome. Like the picture you're showing right now is just the cover of one of the seasons, but just the illustration in the actual show is awesome. Dialogue isn't corny, so I actually really enjoy it. I just have to have more time to watch the other episodes.
Definitely. I mean, out of all the ones that we've talked about, I love anything with vampires. So, I mean, I'll definitely check this out.
Yeah, man, totally check this one out. It's totally worth your time. It's if you have Crunchyroll, I think you can go on Crunchyroll for like a week for free. You can knock them out if you have time. But I really, really liked it so far, and I'm gonna continue to watch it and go through it when I have time. The other thing I watched is a horrible movie, but I love it because it has martial arts in it, and it has Jet Li in it, and that is Jet Li's The One. Have you seen this film, Tone?
Yes. And before you get into your thoughts, I'm going to give you a real quick side note on the music of this movie, real quickly, that you did not expect me to just lay on you real quick. But it has Disturbed's Down with the Sickness, Drowning Pool Bodies, Godsmack Awake, Papa Roach Last Resort. That's what's crazy about it all, though, is no soundtrack was released for the movie. So sadly, I could never do this one as a soundtrack pick of the week because it never had an official soundtrack released with these songs on it. But what's even cooler, I think, by looking a little bit deeper, is the film was composed by Trevor Rabin, who you may not be familiar with, but has been an integral part and a guitar player in the band Yes. So
Yes.
a little bit cool musical background there on Jet Li's The One. And have I seen this movie? This is like my response to your Lover Boy. It's been a long time, but honestly, you just said it's bad, but you love it. So that makes me want to love it. So I want to see this movie. I'm going to currently see if it's streaming anywhere, and I'll watch it this weekend if it is. But go on. I want to hear your thoughts.
No, so the premise is basically that there are time travelers, and one of them is played by Delroy Lindo, and the other is played by Jason Statham.
Oh, and I love
Which,
Delroy Lindo. I can
yeah,
sign up with him with anything.
yeah.
So.
So they're basically tracking these anomalies, and they're going through different multiverses before the multiverse. And they're finding out this one entity is going around killing each and every other version of himself. And every time he kills one, he becomes stronger, which hence is the one. So there's one good Jet Li and there's one bad Jet Li. And they eventually have a battle at the end where the good one fights the bad one. It's a very dumb premise, but it's also very funny. I do like how the beginning they show this is when Gore and Bush were running for president. They have one scene where Gore is announcing something and the Senate is going apeshit, and they have another scene where in the different alternate reality where Bush announces something and the Senate goes apeshit, which is hilarious. So it's got an interesting little backstory to it. It's corny. Jason Statham does his best Jason Statham stuff where he just beats up people and talks in his accent, kind of like every role he's ever done. Besides, no, I don't. Pretty much every role he's ever done. I couldn't even think of one that he's done anything differently. I guess Ghost on Mars, but
Snatch.
yeah, but he's still kind of the same kind of guy in that one too.
Well, I mean, that's him though. I mean,
and I like Jason Statham. I don't know.
The Beekeeper. You ever see The Beekeeper? That was good.
No, I have not. But from everybody told me it's like basically the mechanic.
It is. Mechanic's good too, though. So, but I wanted to ask you real quick before we move on. First of all, what movie do you find to be better? The One, which has two Jet Lis, or Double Impact that has two Van Dams?
Double Impact, because it's got Bolo in it.
That was quick.
Yeah, I love Double Impact. I grew up on. Like, I'm a huge Van Damme fan, even though he's not really a big action star he once was.
That's true. That's very true.
But he hasn't got as fat as Seagal, so that's okay. But yeah, check out The One if you haven't seen it, and check out Hellsing if you're into anime and you like that grimy like art. It's like I said, it's really, really. It's it reminds me more of like a graphic novel and does anime, and I really, really enjoyed it from what I saw.
Excellent picks.
Same, my man. So that's what we've been watching this week. Let us know what you've been watching over at X, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Statistic Penguin Studios or at the Show podcast. Tell them before we get into our main event, which is a long one. When was the first time you saw the movie Misery?
Right when it came out. VHS, probably when it was at that new release, like on the shelf. I remember renting it. Not me personally. I think my mom rented it, and I watched it with my mom, and she loved the movie. And I honestly loved the movie too. I think it was to me, it was cool and different in its own way. Real quick, recently I said to Katie, which I don't know this is how many times I've watched it, and this is how much life is sometimes gets you down. I'm like, would it really be that bad being out there in the middle of nowhere, like nobody bothering you besides her? I mean, she is a problem, but we'll get to that later.
I don't know, man. I watched the movie again earlier just to get a refresher, and I was just like, "Holy crap!" Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, she's bad, but it's bad out there today these days sometimes.
oh, definitely, definitely. Uh, I also saw the film. I was a lot younger than you when this film came out. I think I was like 6. I did happen to remember watching parts of it with my parents. My aunt had rented it, and they were watching it, and then I actually sat down and watched the film, like, when I was, like, 10, I think, again, and I watched it every so often, every other if I see it on TV, I watch it, or I watched it every so often, but I'm just looking through Stephen King films, but yeah, it's probably one of the first films besides It's the series I was introduced to from King.
We for a while now we just have Paramount Plus, but for a while we had like the Showtime add-on on Hulu. And live, I like to go there and just see what was on. And for a while it was on all the time. And honestly, last year when we were doing the show, I probably watched the movie good 50, 60 times. Like, to me, it's the type of movie for me. It doesn't get old because it's simple in what it is, and it's great acting, really. That's why I like it so much, I think, is the
Yeah, to
acting.
be honest with you, I was gonna try to stream it again, and instead of paying the $14 to pay for it, this Tubi actually has it for free. It has some commercials, but they're like 40 seconds,
Oh, that's not a big deal.
so it's not bad. But Tubi has it for free. You can watch stream it on your computer and watch it there, and that's what I did to
Awesome.
watch the film. So there's a free advertisement for Tubi. Give us some money. Um, but Tone, let's get into the development of this Stephen King classic, my friend.
Let's do it.
In my thoughts, I use the technique of positive visualization.
So, as we know, this film is based on a Stephen King novel that was released in 1987 that was published by Viking Publishing. The novel was also named Misery, and it quickly attracted attention due to Stephen King's status as a best-selling horror thriller author at the time, which he still is. You have a DVD, nice, Jack.
Me
The
too.
story, the story, psychological horror, featuring only two main characters for most of the narrative, stood apart from King's more suspenseful and supernatural fare that was drawing potential for a tense, character-driven film. There was interest in the film adaptation. King adaptations were and remain popular in Hollywood, especially since he sells to like new directors for a dollar. Some scripts, which I think is crazy. Uh, Carrie was made in 1976 as an example. The Shining in 1980, Stand by Me, etc. Producers recognized that Misery offered a claustrophobic setup, something different, and it was ideal for like a smaller scale production, which means it'd be cheaper to make. So, film companies are always excited about making cheap movies and make a lot of money. King famously disliked some of his work, but has been very pleased with the director of this film and his other film, Stand By Me, which is an adaptation of The Body. And because he trusted the director's handling of Stand By Me, King was open to having Misery made by a new company, which was Castle Rock. And it's crazy, like how Ryder makes a bunch of Castle Rock films, and Castle Rock is in King's Needful Things. It's also in there was a Hulu series, Castle Rock, that was kind of based in the Stephen King universe, which I
I
think
watched
is
that
kind of
one.
cool. So going on, and we're getting a little too ahead of ourselves with the director, but going into William Goldman's screenplay, he was a celebrated screenwriter who wrote like classics like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men, The Princess Bride. He was hired to write the script for the film, and he had just basically worked on The Princess Bride with Reiner in 1987. In adapting Misery, Goldman toned down some of the book's more graphic violence, and when we go through the film breakdown, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. For instance, yeah, I'm not gonna go into that right now. We'll go into it when we go into the film breakdown. Uh, these are just my notes, I'm reading people. So within this, of course, drew studio interest. Rob Reiner had just formed Castle Rock in 1987 with Martin Schaefer and Andrew Scheinman, Glenn Paddock, and Alan Horn, and he really wanted this film. It became one of Castle Rock's prime projects after King agreed to let them option the book. The synergy was straightforward. King trusted Rob Reiner because, again, The Body was made to Stand By Me, and he really liked his work. So he's like, I think you'll have a good concept of my story and can keep the essence of what I'm trying to go for. Other studio reactions, various other major studios like Warner Brothers, Universal, 20th Century Fox, informally examined the project. However, number one concern for them were limited setting. The script is like basically in Annie Wilkes' house, and it's making it a two-character chamber piece. Some studios doubted its box office potential. Again, the dark tone and violence was kind of a put off for some, and also it wasn't a traditional horror film that people didn't know how to market. So ultimately, due to those three things, Castle Rock had both the creative advantage and the financial motivation to keep Misery in house. The green lighting, Castle Rock committed the budget around $20 million, which is kind of a lot of money in 1990, and set up the project under its distribution deal. The film was released through Columbia Pictures. So we now have our studio negotiations, and we have our basic reading of our screenplay, and you know it's pretty crazy that Castle Rock has come on and taken over all these things. Tone, like, what do you think of the Castle Rock series, and like, do you think that it's always going to be associated with King Films?
Yeah. I mean, generally, I watched the Castle Rock series. Lizzie Kaplan did a good job. She played Annie Wilkes in the Castle Rock series because it's like a younger version of her. But it's crazy to think that for honestly 20 years, Castle Rock, I didn't actually put it all together. You know what I mean? I don't, because I was just too busy just enjoying the movies. You don't really sometimes when you're like 23 years old, not thinking of the production companies and thinking like, oh, that's actually the name of the town in some of these stories of his. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I never watched the series. I always wanted to watch it. I just never got around to it. And you kind of telling me about it makes me now kind of want to watch it.
It
Um,
starts really, really good. You know, I mean, like any series, I think it only had 3 seasons is, um, it didn't have enough time to blossom, kind of like what you were describing on yesterday's mini show with Bruce Campbell's show. Um, you always want more from some of these series, and you know, it only goes so far. And some of King's series, there was another one. I mean, King just does great work all around. I mean, and lately his work has been turned into better stuff. And I think it started with the Stand By Me's and the Miseries.
yeah, I think so. I mean, Silver Bullet was out there, but I know Silver Bullet wasn't like respected or highly appreciated like we like it.
Well,
Uh,
like I love Carrie, but like Carrie isn't like a film like Misery is filmed. You know, I love The
mm,
Shining, but King didn't like The Shining. So I'm just going by like King's adaptations from his own work in his own head. But yeah.
yeah, and also he didn't get along with Kubrick.
Well, yeah,
But
oh, yeah.
in terms of the director, we kind of like let it out that Rob Reiner was the director of the film, but there was internal discussions between Andrew Scheinman and William Goldman that were owners of Castle Rock that started it. That said, Rob, why don't you take over this role as director? You already did well with The Body, and at first he was kind of wavering towards taking it, but wasn't really sure. They did consider some other people like George Roy Hill that directed The Sting. They also tried to go with Mike Nicholas, who did The Graduate and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. But there were no really formal offers. And Reiner eventually just took it because, one, he loved King's books. He's a big advocate of King's books. And again, Stephen King trusted him with his vision. So he's like, all right, I have creative control because I own the company. I have the writer's back, support for this with my vision and his vision mixed. So let's just get this going. And he eventually was selected as the director. So there's not really a big story on like directors being chosen, like besides the other two that were considered. But I once Castle Rock took it, I mean, it's kind of like unforeseen, thing that Rob Reiner is going to be the director.
Yes.
But when it came to casting, the casting of Paul Sheldon, which is the main character of the film, and he's basically a successful novelist. Like he's best known for writing this series called Misery, which is a Victorian romance novel featuring the character Misery Chastain. I'm sorry, the way she says
Mhm.
Misery Chastain. Uh, his whole role is he's basically physically restrained in the film, and to kind of fill this role, they went with sort of several actors. One was William Hurt, who is known for his intensity and like dramatic roles, like Kiss the Spider Woman, Broadcast News. He turned down the role more than once because he was uneasy with the brutality in the film. Phoebe Cates, she keeps coming up. Her husband, Kevin Kline, was mentioned in some accounts as a potential choice, but never reached an advanced stage of negotiation. They think that maybe he might have been considered too suave, or comedic for a helpless aspects of Paul's predicament. I can't see Kevin Kline playing this role.
Not
I'm
after
sorry.
watching A Fish Called Wanda. No,
Yeah, I mean, he did an excellent job in Dave, though.
they did. He did.
Harrison Ford, a top box office draw at the time. He was in Indiana Jones and Star Wars. He was often rumored to have passed on Misery because the role was very passive and at odds with his action hero persona. I could see Harrison Ford doing this role.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Dustin Hoffman was another. Hoffman was exploring varied roles in the late 80s and 90s, but may have declined over concerns about the project's violence or scheduling. And you got to remember, too, this is fresh off Hoffman's Oscar, I believe, in Rain Man. So he
Mhm.
won Rain Man, I think, in 88, and this film
Mhm.
was made in 90. Uh, your boy, Al Pacino, was mentioned on the wish list for the intense role. No concrete negotiations were widely documented for him, though.
Uh,
Another guy
that
who
can't be.
is
That can't be. That can't be.
Are you playing Tony?
Yes. Didn't go quite
Oh,
as loud, but it was
uh,
Scarface.
I know, I heard it. Uh, Warren Beatty was considered, and he is Hollywood royalty. He expressed interest, but reportedly suggested that Paul Sheldon's character needs to be more overly proactive instead of, or sympathetic. Ultimately, he passed because the possibility to pursue directorial or romantic leading man projects was kind of more in his forte, even though he was like 60 and he's still going. Uh, um, most of them were the actors hesitated because they were fear of being upstaged. Most of them were in, the role is him being confined to a bed, so there's not really much to work there. And I don't know if she's related to Jessica Chastain, Sam. She might be one of her long lost relatives. Violence and psychological darkness is something that actors sometimes don't want to deal with. But this is in the 90s too, so it's a different method acting of how people act. Like Deer Hunter was something that was totally different. People weren't really going for those dark roles, and it kind of goes with the times now that you have people kind of looking for those dark roles and to showcase their skills. And people at this time weren't really into it. Also, in the 80s and 90s, it was really competitive for top tier actors, so scheduling conflicts always happen. Uh, Eventually, there was a guy named James Caan, who is Sonny Corleone, that most of you know from, or Elf, which is kind of funny. He was best known for higher energy roles, like I said, The Godfather, and also as Thief. He brought a masculine gravitas to the role. Uh, he loved the challenge of playing an immobilized man, and it was
Ooh.
something new to him. That's something that relied basically on your facial expressions and your line delivery. So it was like a challenge to him. Also, Rob Reiner liked Khan's ability to deliver a vulnerability without losing a certain edge. He also had comedic timing, seen in films like Kiss Me Goodbye and Elf, which could serve more of a grim humor. So we got our Paul. Now we gotta go to our Annie. And Annie, her character is a former nurse and Paul Sheldon's self-proclaimed number one fan. She's a crazy person, maternal, and then completely batshit crazy in the next second. The actress needs to embody an unassuming, also almost cozy presence that flips into terrifying mania. So that's what they were looking for. Well, who did they consider? First, they considered Bette Midler.
Ooh.
She was offered the role, but found it too violent and disturbing at the time. She later admitted regretting turning it down. Of course, she did. Jessica Lange, an Oscar-winning star for Tootsie and Blue Sky, rumored to have been considered early on. She might have passed due to scheduling conflicts. Again, there were a lot of competitive films in the 80s and 90s. Angelica Houston, another Oscar winner for Prizzi's Honor, conflicting reports say she was in the mix. Timing overlapped with The Grifters, which could have taken precedence over this film. Babs, Barbara Streisand, was actually considered. But widely believed that she was uncomfortable with the nature of Annie being violent. Also, it was a stylistic mismatch for her. She was more into romantic comedies in that era. This one kind of was like, what? This person was actually considered, which is Mary Tyler Moore.
That's interesting.
She was less commonly cited, but sometimes mentioned in industry chatter. She's known for wholesome, beloved public images. The role of Annie would have been a shocking pivot. If approached, it likely did not go beyond initial interest. So, why was Kathy Bates chosen? Well, she had a very strong stage and character acting background. She was really well respected in theater circles and earned a Tony nomination for her stage and Broadway plays. She wasn't a huge household name yet in film, but it was allowing audiences to accept her as Annie Wilkes without perceived notations of her. So that kind of helped her that she wasn't really big in the theater aspect on times of big films because people didn't know how to judge her. Like the Mary Tyler Moore, she was America's sweetheart, but Kathy Bates, nobody knew her at the time, so it gave them a easier way to select her. William Goldman, who wrote the script, had a recommendation. He believed an unknown or lesser known performer will heighten attention. He felt that Annie would be more unpredictable if it was played by somebody that wasn't typecast in one particular role or persona. Reiner also praised her audition. He was convinced she could handle Annie's broad emotional swings from nurse-like to sadistic mania while still maintaining an eerie plausibility. And that picture always cracks me up because of her smile.
Oh yeah.
Also, this role put her on the map. As we know, she won the Oscar for this role in 1990, and the first time a woman starring in a horror thriller film won in that category, and remains one of the most lauded King adaptation performances.
Very awesome.
Sam better start acting right, or I'm buying a sledgehammer. Oh man, Katie, Caitlin, and is about to hobble Sam. As far as the major supporting roles, Richard Farnsworth was cast as Sheriff Buster. That was a tongue twister right there. Richard Farnsworth was born in 1920, so he's an older actor. He was a stuntman in the 30s. Over decades, he transitioned to acting roles, eventually earning an Oscar nomination for Comes with a Horseman in 1978, and his critical acclaim for The Gray Fox in 1982. Farnsworth was known for his kind and folksy screen presence, often playing characters who excluded warmth and integrity. He kind of reminds me of a way older Sam Elliott.
Yeah, you know what? That's an excellent example. I mean, yeah, I take that 10 times out of 10. That's a good one.
Sam says, "I'm already bedridden by choice, so it wouldn't be difficult for it to be hobbled." Misery 2 with the Reeves. So he was cast because Rob Reiner sought an actor who could authentically portray a small town sheriff with a blend of folksy charm and tenacity. And since he was such a nice guy and was gentle, he kind of fit the role pretty well. Sheriff Buster is probably one of my favorite characters in this film, and with his fate, you kind of like, oh man, that sucks.
Yeah, it's my favorite when Katie asked me how work's going. His fate is pretty much the gif is what I send her on the stairs when he gets blown blown a hole right through his stomach. Poor Buster. He's so awesome in this movie.
Yeah. And on set, Farnsworth's longtime experience and calm demeanor are said to have balanced the more intense atmosphere of Kathy Bates and James Caan's scenes. His His approachable personality also helped maintain a sense of warmth even in intense scenes. He's just you could tell like he played really well. The chemistry with him and Bates and Khan, even though he didn't have too many scenes with Khan, just like one, but just his his warmth with Annie when he goes to her house, and even when he's talking to the agent and stuff, you can kind of see like you kind of feel for the guy, and you want him to be okay. Like just little interactions with his wife is pretty hilarious when he's going through the snow and falls in. There's a little comedic timing there, but he did a great job.
Really.
Speaking of his wife, Frances Sternhagen was cast as Deputy Virginia. She is a highly respected in theater circles with multiple Tony Awards and notable stage credits. She's also recognized for her roles in films such as Outland opposite Sean Connery and reoccurring appearances on Cheers as Cliff's mom. Now that I think about it, totally remember her as Cliff's mom. Uh, she's known for being humorous and ability to inhabit small town or matriarchal characters with authenticity. And that's what the writer was looking for. People who could kind of show that they're from a small town atmosphere and can kind of portray that on to the audience. Uh, she is great with our buddy Buster. Their chemistry is awesome. And she's known for being comedic, and that kind of helped with her on set and her play off the character of Buster Farnsworth, and I thought that was great. Uh Lauren Bacall or
Bacall.
Bacall, thank you. Lauren Bacall, thank you.
You're welcome.
As Marcia Sindel, which is the picture you just put up, as Paul's literary agent. She was a big figure in Hollywood's golden age, famously starring in classical films like To Have and Have Not in 1944 and The Big Sleep in 1946, alongside Humphrey Bogart.
She was married to Humphrey Bogart.
Oh man. Katie says, "You see, it's just that kind of sarcasm that's giving our marriage real spice." Buster.
It's the one we always use in our own marriage when I speak. I guess she says that to me quite a lot. Remember, he says that to her in the movie.
Yeah, quite a lot. So the reason she was cast was she had a strong, no nonsense demeanor. Conveyed that Marcia was both protective of Paul and savvy about this publishing business. She kind of played that both role. Bacall's presence adds star power to the supporting cast and underscores the gravity of Paul's captivity. She does a great job in the limited scene she's in as well. As far as additional minor supporting characters, you have Graham Jarvis played the character Libby, who's basically briefly aiding the sheriff in. You got JT Walsh in this film.
That's great.
He's in this. But actually, he's not in this film. He was actually known for rumored to have a cameo in this film, which is why I had this wrong. Although JT Walsh was known for his strong character roles around the time, he does not actually appear in Misery. The rumor occasionally occurs online and arises online, but there's no credit or widely known knowledge of a cameo by him.
He's in the movie.
Apparently, it's saying that he's not. From what I don't remember him in it.
It's a quick scene. Like they interview him after the crash, and they're talking to the police officer that's talking. That's JT Walsh.
Ooh, man, you are wrong, internet.
Because number one, remember I used to tell you
Sherman Douglas, yeah.
It's very simple though. It's like it's technically, I don't know what you would call it, but you know why? Because JT Walsh is a legend. He's in a lot of classic movies, and it's kind of like reminds me of when we did Roadhouse and Keith David has just that minor role as the bartender, and you're like, why isn't he in this more? Because he's such a great actor. That's kind of what this one is.
Yeah, but he was cut. His scene was cut out completely.
Well, yeah, but like he gives the drink and bartend in like Roadhouse, but like that's literally it. And you're like, you see him, but you're like, why isn't this role more? It's kind of the same thing here, but they don't really go into the police here besides Buster.
Yeah. He plays Buster too in Needful Things, doesn't he, JT Walsh?
He sure does. Yeah.
So
Good
apparently,
catch
Stephen
right
King's
there.
a
That
thing.
was a good catch right there.
Yeah. So I was wrong. Well, this is the information I got from
No, no, you're good.
IMDb, so they were wrong. Even though he appears in the film, I just searched it up right now. But Rob Reiner uh, does not have a documented cameo, unlike some directors who insert themselves into roles. But he did visit the set frequently. I'm pretty sure Rob Reiner's somewhere in there, probably his hand somewhere in there.
He had to be. Had to be.
But he doesn't do a a documented where he's just walking around. Uh, but so the supporting cast help contrast with Annie's and Paul's world. Basically, they brought like a more realism to the small town aspect, and they're there for comic relief. I think it's really well cast because this is a film basically with two people, and like that picture right there is hilarious because it's Rob Reiner over his shoulder,
I know.
Kathy Bates filming her and James Caan scene. It's basically a shot of just two people most of the time, and it kind of plays through. It shows what they're doing along with what Buster's doing with his wife and the townsfolk, and it kind of like you need that aspect of the outside entities to kind of make the story go, keep the story moving, as it's mostly set in one setting of the Wilkes house. Um, so I think it was nicely cast. Home. What do you think?
I mean, none of those other actresses could play her role. A couple of those other actors I could see, but I mean, it's James Caan. I think he does a great job in the role. And it also adds to his legacy of being a great actor because, as you state, it's the role's confined. So you have to do a lot with a little.
Yeah, and I think Reiner really did well with that. Uh, the filming locations for this were in Colorado, like in the story, and that's another thing I thought was kind of weird about the book. King's novels are usually based in Maine. This one was based in Colorado, maybe because of the I think Overlook Hotel was also based in Colorado, I believe, because it existed, which I can understand for The Shining. But he based this in rural Colorado, maybe because of the mountains.
Could be. Could be.
But they also filmed at Lake Tahoe area in California Nevada border. They also filmed in Genoa, Nevada. The soundstage of Los Angeles, which is this picture here, it shows them on the soundstage. This is where the hobbling scene was filmed.
Exactly.
There was weather considerations. Although the production wanted real snow for authenticity, filming schedules didn't align with peak snowfall. At times, the crew relied on fake snow or shot at higher elevations near Tahoe to ensure a snowy landscape. The unpredictability of mountain weather meant the crew had to be flexible, occasionally shifting schedules if snowfall was insufficient on the roads or were temporarily closed. So some of the challenges they had, again, snowfall. It was unpredictable. Even in the snowy mountain ranges, conditions can vary significantly, which I mean it's understandable because you're in the damn mountains. They had to monitor the weather forecast closely to capture necessary exterior shots with consistent snow coverage. When real snow was lacking, they use artificial snow, as we said, which can contemplate continuity, particularly if there's a mixture of real and fake snow in the same scene. Fake snow does not melt, real snow does, uh, which can cause issues. The road accessibility, as we said, that some of the roads are closed due to snow or something that was going on. There was trouble with them getting around. They had to construct and maintain sets like Annie's house. Production designer Norman Garwood designed a claustrophobic, homey yet ominous set, which is a great shot here, tone of that. Every detail, floor, wallpaper was made, old-fashioned decor. They wanted to reflect Annie's personality, and I think they did a really good job with the way it looks. I especially like her bedroom with the chest, the cedar chest in front, where usually you would keep your covers. But it's kind of like a room that I would expect her to have when she's sitting there watching the dating game and eating Cheetos with a whole 2 liter of Coke. Uh, there were special effects for violence. Annie's brutal acts, including the hobbling, demanded careful choreography, prosthetics, and camera trickery. Practical effects needed to look realistic without actually harming James Caan. So they had to do a lot of close coordination for that. Also, James Caan's physical limitations in the role. This kinda is something that kinda was a challenging for them because he's basically sitting or laying for the most of the movie. He's bedbound or wheelchair bound, so Khan spent hours in one place, which can physically challenging. I mean, your muscles stiff up, you get cramps, you get bored. I mean you're acting, but you still get bored and you get you're uncomfortable. Also, you have to do with the continuity of his injuries and the mobility, change through the story, the makeup and wardrobe have to go into this, ensure consistent appearance of bruises and bandages and all that stuff that happens with filming, but that is filming. Kathy Bates' intensity and her emotional demands was kind of a little rough patch they went through. She portrays Annie required rapidly shifting from the caretaker to the explosive rage, and performing these emotional extremes could be exhausting for her. And the production supported Bates with breaks in controlled environments, especially for the more harrowing sequences. Sometimes when you act as something and you really get into that character, you kinda don't like what you're becoming. The best example I can give is James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano. He would keep a one of the ways to make himself angry was he kept a pebble in his shoe to piss him off, or he would go out in the cold with nothing on, with, like, no shirt on just to get himself in the angry mood or go hours without sleeping. And then he would just go and, like, kinda seclude himself in, the car to sleep or whatnot to kinda get out of that character. That's what sometimes for these emotional roles, that's what actors have to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's gave she gave it all for this one.
Mhm. Scenes involving violence, such as the hobbling, were extensively rehearsed for safety and accuracy, so that can be kinda tiring, and then, you have to test the props, all that stuff. This had a moderate budget of $20,000,000, even though I think $20,000,000 is a little higher. It wasn't a low budget indie, but it was also a massive studio it wasn't a massive studio blockbuster budget, so that's one thing, and then you had a tight shooting schedule uh, for this film that caused, a lot of issues, scheduling around the availability of cast, particularly Lauren Bacall for her how you say is it Bacall, right?
Yep.
Lauren Bacall for her agent scenes and location windows, with the weather and road closures created pressure to stay on pace. Also, you have to be, make it believable. Shooting near Lake Tahoe provided the authentic part of it, but you have to make it look good, and then you have to make sure the cast is committed to it. Despite the physical and emotional demands, both Khan and Kathy delivered performances that are lauded by critics and audiences, and we'll go into that a little bit more. Uh, Tone, talk a little bit about the score.
All right. So the score, okay, if you were unfamiliar, came out July 1st, 1991. It's only 29 minutes and 55 seconds. Okay. What I enjoy is that the lead off track on the score is called Number One Fan. Well, we know that that's just some of these titles are great. Buster's Last Stand. That's the name of another track on that thing. But a real tight little score by Mark Shaman, who further research seems to be on a movie that you recently talked about, another Rob Reiner classic, A Few Good Men. He shot When Harry Met Sally the year before with Rob Reiner, Adam's Family, a whole bunch of movies. For me personally, two things that always stick out for me with the music in the film are her love of Liberace and Liberace records, and because I love that ridiculous movie with Michael Douglas playing with Liberace, it's just so hilarious because she's like, "I'm gonna get out my Liberace records." And for me, one of my favorite songs of all time, and honestly, I heard now that we talk about it here, I heard it here for the first time, and that is Shotgun by Junior Walker and the All Stars. It's what starts out when he's driving before he crashes. It's just an instrumental with the awesome saxophone. Um, the music is cool in this movie because, again, with such an intimate setting, you need the music to pretty much portray that, and I think it does.
Definitely. When you mentioned Liberace, I couldn't help but laugh because Brian had sent a quote from Austin Powers.
Uh-huh.
And when they're like, "Oh, wait," I think she's asking him like, "Oh, so what did change your mind? Like what blew your mind? And he's like, yeah, I never, what really blew my mind was Liberace was gay. I didn't see that one coming. Just the way he says it cracks me up. That was like peak Mike Myers. That always makes me laugh. It's like, I can't believe Liberace was gay. I didn't see that one coming. But that
You
was
ever see
hilarious.
Stewart Saves His Family?
No.
It's awful, awful movie, but like he's just talking at the table and his dad looks over at him. He's like, I got Liberace for a son. I don't know. A really ridiculous, bad SNL. They really came out with some bad SNL movies.
Yeah. But that is our film development. We have found out where the film came from, the actors who may appeared and did appear that we're saying that they're not because they're not in credited roles, but they are in the film. Uh, Also, the filming locations and some of the struggles that the film had gone through. Tony, ready to go into this sucker?
Let's do it.
Cool. Let's go into this film breakdown.
See the arc? He starts down here. He ends up here. Where's my arc, Paulie?
So the film opens up with James Caan sitting at a typewriter typing and finishing a manuscript. I always like this scene tone because it's really cool that he has like a ritual. And I know people who are in this profession do have rituals. They kind of do like a thing when something's finished. And his particular ritual is having a battle of champagne and smoking a cigarette. Now, Stephen King has his own writing rituals, he says, but they're not exactly like this. He is superstitious about his routines. Uh, the champagne brand is something that I found really hilarious that people actually cared what kind of champagne brand it is in this film. Like, there's fans that actually were searching to find out what champagne brand, and it's speculated that it was a real French champagne brand, but the film notes say it was just a prop brand. So it couldn't
Mhm.
even be real champagne. Uh, Also, we're set in Colorado. He's at a lodge. And again, these scenes were filmed around Lake Tahoe. It's a beautiful scenery when he's driving.
Oh, it is very beautiful.
Also, when I watched the film today and he plays, what's the name of the song he plays, Tom?
Shotgun.
Shotgun. When Shotgun starts off, I thought of the Cosby Show right away. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know why. It's because it reminded me of the Cosby Show when he does a little dance with the tuxedo.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but as he's driving along, he doesn't have a seatbelt on, which I guess like it was a norm in 1990. And it just starts getting worse and worse when he's driving, and he basically crashes.
Uh-huh.
He goes over land of a snowbank and basically crashes his car. With a copy of his untitled script in his satchel. He's basically, crashed, and then we go back and kind of like a flashback of him talking to his agent, and they're going over his new script, which is the one he just finished. He's talking about Misery and how he doesn't feel like a writer because he wrote Misery. So he, is really excited about this new script because he thinks he's pretty much done with the Misery series. I really like the car crash here. I love the fact that he is you know, he's dancing to Shotgun, like jamming out, and then just starts fucking turning his wheel like crazy. Like it reminded me of when you went to the driver's ed and they took you to like those simulators. That's what it reminded me of when he was doing it.
Well, like the wheel looks like it has like zero traction. It's just like
Yeah, that's why it was cracking me up when I was watching it. But he gets crashed, and then miraculously somebody comes with a crowbar and opens up his car, pulls him out, gives him resuscitates him mouth to mouth and compressions, and picks him up on their back and carries him. He says like Corky Romano, Sam, and carries him on their back away, which is crazy because that person just picked him up like nothing. And James Caan's a big dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Picked him up
Sonny
like
Corleone you're picking up there.
Yeah,
That ain't nobody there.
So the thing is to this is a silhouette of the person that pulled him out, and Rob Reiner's really big for using silhouettes in his films. He likes the tight framing of them. Uh, the funny thing is, I'm like, man, did Kathy Bates really pick this dude up? No, it was a stunt, just stunt double that did it. But it would have been amazing if it was her. You know, she did tackle a guy in the Water Boy, so it can happen. Uh, well, Paul begins to kind of come out of his slumber to this.
I'm your number one fan. There's nothing to worry about. You're gonna be just fine. I'll take good care of you. I'm your number one fan.
That always cracked me up. I love how that's shot though, because it's like him coming out of the drowsiness of the drugs
Mhm.
or, whatever he was in, like he was passed out, and you just hear that voice, and then you hear her say that, and he's like, "You're my number one fan," and she goes, "I am silly, but I'm a nurse." It's just, we meet Annie, who's played by Kathy Bates, as we said. He wakes up at her house. His legs are pretty jacked up. And when I was doing research for this scene, Tone, it says that Kathy Bates consulted several medical professionals on how to splint broken legs convincingly. And the production team used realistic props for the leg braces and traction. We see that the house is kind of like an older, I would say, like colonial type housing.
Mm.
It's kind of old looking.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd say.
and she's telling him, like, that he's in a farmhouse with her, the roads are impossible to get through, and the phone lines are down, but she's gonna nurse him back to health so she can take him to the hospital. And, she's, kinda, like, feeding him and washing him and giving him, pills, that she gives him, for pain. Keeps telling him.
Novril. They're
Yeah,
called Novril.
which is a fake company, but they're giving he's only giving pain. He takes them willingly.
I need my Novril for my pain.
Yeah, she takes him willingly. He takes him willingly, and basically, like, yeah, you kind of, at first you're like, oh, she's a big fan, but she's trying to save him, so you don't think anything is up. Uh, Eventually, you see, the sheriff is called by his agent, who's scared at looking for him. He's been missing for a couple days. No, I gotta tell you this story off air, Tone.
Okay.
This is one that my wife just said. Um, so he's been missing for a couple days. So Sheriff Buster is introduced with the agent calling him, his literary agent calling, saying that he usually should be back. He usually calls his daughter when he's back in town. And he's like, okay, well, if I see his name come up on anything, which is basically him running in on a sticky note, he's like, I'll let you know. And we get our first introduction to Farnsworth and his wife, Virginia, as they're sitting kind of in their office. Uh, but while Paul's kind of resting up, he meets a certain character.
These are slum kids.
Oh, he meets a certain character.
I thought it was time you two should meet.
Paul, say hello to my favorite beast in the whole world, my sow, Misery.
Misery.
Yes, I told you I was your number one fan.
Yeah, I'm starting to believe you.
She names her pig Misery. Also during this, she discovers that he has a manuscript with her, and he tells her, thinking nothing of it, like, how about you give a read to it, and then you tell me what you think of it. And when she's reading it, like, one of the first things we see her getting kind of mad, she tells him there's a lot of swearing in it. And Paul responds with this.
These are slum kids.
Love this.
I was a slum kid.
Oh.
Everybody talks like that.
They do not. What do you think I say when I go to the feed store in town? Oh, now, Wally, give me a bag of that effing pig feed and 10 pounds that bitchly cow corn. And the bank, do I tell Mrs. Bollinger, oh, here's one big bastard of a check. Give me some of your Christing money. There, look there. See what you made me do?
Hold on, before you go any further, because she showed me this movie, every time my mom would get mad, that's what I'd be like. I'm like, you're acting like Annie. You're going, look, look what you made me do. And then she'd be like, cut it out. And then we'd start laughing. So like that was so easy to like get her when she was upset to break her, because that's a hilarious, great line right there.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, she just goes from 0 to 10,
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
She just goes like ape shit. And all he was doing was just trying to
His
explain to
face.
her.
If you
Yeah.
go back, if you watch it again, I love watching just his eyes looking at her after she does that. Like, what the fuck? Where am I?
Yeah. It's great, you know, visuals to it, the way she's just going from 0 to 10, and he's like, "What the fuck did I just get myself into?" Again, he's telling her he wants to speak to his daughter. He wants to, talk to his agent. She keeps saying the phones are down, the roads are impassable, and, we kinda see an unpeeling in that scene of her character of being crazy.
That's true.
He does all that great acting. Yeah, he does.
That
It's
was
just funny.
excellent acting.
But, like, he's just like, "Holy shit." I mean, what I would probably be the same way if I saw that. Uh, and around this time too, the sheriff is searching for him. He's looking at, we kinda see, like, where he almost gets caught, well, not get caught, but he almost finds his car for the first time,
Mhm.
when he and his wife see a broken branch. And then when he goes back to his car, he, he's getting back into the sheriff's car, and Annie is driving back on the road that she said wasn't working. She goes and tells, Paul, "Oh, I got this book from the store." And he's like, "I thought you said the roads were down." She's like, "Oh, there's only a road into town." And he goes, "I called that agent of yours." He's like, You told me the phones are down." She's like, "No, they have one at the store." And I told him that,
Listen,
you'll be,
bullshit.
yeah, you're okay, and let your daughter know.
Mhm.
And also I talked to the hospital, and they told me, you'll be fine to get rested, and they'll send an ambulance for you, and I can take care of you. And at this point, he's like, "Yeah, there's something going on here." So, and she's also telling him, "Oh, I'm reading your book, the book, I'm on page 70." And then at night is where it really gets creepy, because she comes into his room screaming this.
Annie, in 1871, women often died in childbirth. But her spirit is the important thing, and Misery Spirit is still alive.
I don't want her dead! I want her! And you murdered her!
No, I didn't.
Who did?
No one. She died. She just slipped away.
Right.
Slipped away! Slipped away! She didn't just slip away! You did it!
All that from killing her favorite character of Misery.
Well,
The way
I
she
mean,
Yeah, the way
let's
she
be
shakes his
really
bed is
honest.
hilarious.
If they killed Jack Burton, you'd react that way too.
I don't know if I'd be shaking the, John
No, maybe not
Carpenter's
that
bed
bad. You're
while
not
he's
gonna be
scared
hobbling anybody.
shitless. While he's
No,
scared
you're right.
shitless and this is
No,
happening.
you would do
It
that.
is, and, Restless, it is terrifying when she does it, because and he does a great job, like, showing that in his face. Like, he's like, and he's helpless, he can't do anything, his arm's broken, his legs are broken. Uh, he's basically like, "Oh, what the hell is going on here?" And I mean, what is he supposed to do, Tone? Like, what would you do in that situation?
Well, first of all, it goes like as you said, you start to be like, well, you're trapped, you can't move, you can't do anything. Um, what you do is pretty much what he does is you got to almost play dead until you can get well enough to maybe strike.
Yeah, and, you know,
But he
he,
messes up. We're gonna get to that in a second here.
yeah, so she basically gets mad at him, and she burns his manuscript in a in a grill in the middle of the room. She
His
pours
face.
Yeah, and then she's like, "Oh, good gracious," when the ashes are flying all over. And you can see he's just tore up, he's tore up. And when I was doing, research for this, they kept saying that the script's name was Fast Cars. No
Yeah.
idea why, but the script's name was Fast Cars.
Because I think it was it sounded like from watching it was like Paul this was going to be Paul. So what it was going to be Paul's. This was going to be Paul's breaking away from misery. He was going. He was like more like mobsters, bad language, cool cars, and she was like not going to buy this because again, at this point, the new Misery book hadn't come out yet, so she's still like.
Yeah, she's still that, and then when she bought the new Misery book is when she went ape shit.
And then she's really then going,
yeah,
I guess you said,
what? And when she burns it, all the pain in his eyes because he had finished writing that book and he was really passionate about it because it finally got him out of, the misery because he didn't feel like he wasn't a writer. Until when he was doing Misery, he just felt like it was BS, so that's why he killed her off. But Annie Wilkes, she wasn't going for that, man. She did not like that. She burns the manuscript in front of him, and again, this is foreshadowing, showing that she is batshit crazy, as well as what happens later in the film. But like you kept saying, Tony, she kept supplying him with Norville, which is a fictional painkiller, and she would often administrate it forcefully to him, which he notices he's becoming dependent on during this time. So he starts to kind of like hide them. He starts to hide the pills. And during this time of doing so, Annie keeps him in like a wheelchair. And I like when she pushes around this scene, she's like, look, how does it feel? He's like, I always wanted to see this side of the room.
That's a classic line.
Yeah, and she's like, I bought you an electric shaver. And he's like, oh, if I would have known it would have been like this, I would have burned all my manuscripts. Like, which shows like he's just fed up with her, but trying to joke around in his own way. But Annie is like, she's out there, man. She tells him, hey, I'm gonna got something for you. We're gonna set up your studio. And he's like, what? Studio? She's like, we're gonna set up a new writing studio for you, silly. And she goes and gets this coffee table and a typewriter that's missing the N key, and she gets him some paper. And he tells her, oh, why are we doing it? She's like, you have to rewrite Misery. You're bringing Misery back from the dead. And he's just like, what? Like, knowing this lady is not all there and, crazy. He's like, he just decides to go along with it. And then he's like, well, Annie, the paper you got me, it smears. And she's like, it's the most expensive paper. And he's like, but it smears. And he goes and shows it to her. And she becomes like really upset at this, in this scene. And she starts to say she's unappreciated.
Annie, what's the matter?
What's the matter? I'll tell you what's the matter. I go out of my way for you. I do everything to try and make you happy. I feed you, I clean you, I dress you, and what thanks do I get? Oh, you bought the wrong paper, Annie. I can't write on this paper, Annie. Well, I'll get your stupid paper, but you just better start showing me a little more appreciation around here, Mr. Man.
And when she drops the paper on him, that's what hats me up.
His face, the way his head shoots back when he drops the paper. Number two, it's like I could see saying that maybe to like somebody you've been married to 25 years, like they disrespected you the last time. But like she doesn't even know this guy besides being an author, and this isn't the internet age. All she knows about this guy is what's in the back of this book, which she's probably seen on TV, very, very little. So it's not like she's got like internet worth of information here on this gentleman, and she's literally talking to him like that's like her brother.
Yeah, definitely in there,
because you can't really think that she like likes him romantically, because would you ever?
She does tell him she loves him.
Well, she gets that to that point, but like you wouldn't. But she's crazy. See, that's the problem. You dissect this too much, you'll go crazy. I'm like, because like if she's crazy, was she always crazy, or was she just a time bomb waiting to go off as soon as she went around somebody? That was always kind of what I thought. To be fair, I'm not going to go into it. Those questions are answered on Castle Rock.
Yeah. So William Goldman included the missing N, as a to reflect Annie's controlling nature over even minor details. On set, they had to ensure each type page matched continuity with the missing letter. That sucks. So he had to use words that didn't have N in it.
That's great.
That's ridiculous.
Great.
Annie dubs this title of Misery as Misery's Return, which will become her personal obsession. And she's like, "You should dedicate this film book to me. I nursed you back to health and you brought back misery." And he's just like, "What the hell is going on?" And during this time, when she goes out to get his uh new paper, after she slams the paper on him, he starts to explore the area. He goes and finds, you know, the pills that he had been taking. And as I said earlier, he's starting to like hoard those pills. He's putting them in his mattress. He cut a little area in his mattress and was put pills in there. And he goes and gets a package and she comes back and he is sweating like he was out for like a run in 100-degree weather. And he's like, I just need my pills. I take the pain away.
Take the pain
And
away. I need a novel.
yeah, and she goes and gets him for him and she believes him, helps him back in bed, which kind of saves him this time. But he continues to explore the house. And while he's doing so, he's looking and finding stuff about her, her past and whatnot. But he makes one vital mistake, which
Mhm.
is he chips a penguin statue, which I thought was kind of funny. Um, but that she notices. But while this is going on, he has to write for her while and when she goes away, he explores, but he's writing for her and trying to put these subliminal messages in his text, and she's going and weeding them out. And there's a scene where she comes in very pissed at what he's written.
And they always start with the end of the last week. And there was Rocket Man trying to get out. And here comes the cliff. And just before the car went off the cliff, he jumped free. And all the kids cheered. But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week. Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us. This isn't fair. He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car."
The cock-a-doodie car. Annie's
Yeah,
bizarre, childish expletives, cock-a-doodie and dirty birdie were a mix of lines from King's novel and additional William Goldman flourishes. Bates practiced using these lines in a sweet but scary tone. She does a great job of doing it. And she gets mad because she says that it's not making sense and he's dragging it along, which he is because he's just writing this shit to get it over with. But you know, she's really on him, man. She wants him to finish this story.
I like when he's writing the story and he looks out the window and she's with the pig and he flicks her off.
Yeah. Yeah. That's while he's writing. And like I said, this whole, thing is he's kind of being forced to, he kind of feels his fate. Like he doesn't know what to do. He's hoarding these pills and whatnot. And eventually, he decides to have dinner with her. And they have dinner together. And he puts all the pills into her wine glass, hoping to knock her out or kill her. And she spills it over during dinner.
Oh,
And his face is so great when it happens. He's like, "Oh shit." And she kind of walks away, like fine. It, after that scene, then he's finding out like I have to find some way to get out. So he uses a bobby pin to get out of his room when she locks it. He then goes and like explores and finds out that she was a nurse. She has a scrapbook where she was killing, I believe, was it children?
yeah, babies. She was like a nurse who was babies were mysteriously dying when she
Yeah.
was on her watch.
Yeah, and this kinda, like, shows a downward spiral of her because it's raining outside, and she comes up to him, like, crying, uh, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And she, feels lonely and worthless, and she's, like, saying it's kinda, like, hinting she has suicidal thoughts, and, it's showing that she has a mood disorder, kind of. Um, this scene is the scene of that scene is often referenced in award shows retrospectives of Bates's, performance, showcasing her range. So, like, the Golden Globes has performed that used that scene to show her range as an actress. Uh, she's just masterful in this. So it's like acting 101 from Kathy Bates this whole film.
It is. She really, she, does like 7 different levels in this movie.
Yeah, and she goes back to her room, and that's when she notices the penguin statue chipped. and her scrapbook was out. She then goes back into his room and like injects him with a syringe.
The way she comes in like that.
Yeah, he's like, no, and then
No,
she's
he's like sleeping. Like he wakes up and she's just like,
yeah, he's like, no, and then he just like falls
yeah.
asleep. And then we get the famous scene of this.
Annie, what's the matter?
Oh,
Eventually, you'll come to accept the idea of being here. Paul, do you know about the early days of the Kimberley diamond mines? Do you know what they did to the native workers who stole diamonds? Don't worry, they didn't kill them. That would be like junking a Mercedes just because it had a broken spring. No, if they caught them, they had to make sure they could go on working, but they also had to make sure they could never run away. The operation was called hobbling.
and this scene is pretty graphic when she puts a board between his two legs and takes a sledgehammer and just basically breaks his ankles to where he passes out. Now, King's book is way, way more graphic and violent with psychological torture and physical torture than the movie is. In the book tone, she actually cuts his foot off with an axe,
That's what I thought.
and then she stops the bleeding with a blowtorch.
Oh,
Screenwriter William Goldman and Rob Reiner chose the sledgehammer, hobbling for cinematic shock while keeping an R rating feasible. James Caan admitted in interviews that even knowing it was staged, the setup gave him chills because Bates' performance felt so genuine.
oh,
And after she breaks his legs and he passes out, she goes, "God, I love you."
yes. I always
Oh my
like
God.
earlier in that when she's like, Paul, I
Yeah.
know you've been out. My penguin always faces due south.
Yeah. I found your key. When she shows up the bobby pin. When the audience reactions to this, when they first early test screenings, they were like gasping and like some people walked out. A claim repeated in various interviews resulted by varies by screening, but a lot of people walked out. To get this scene, a prosthetic foot and a hinge mechanism were used. The camera angle was perfectly chosen for maximum impact, just enough to show the ankle bend unnaturally. Yeah, it's pretty crazy when it happens, when the hobbling happens, man.
The hobbling.
Yeah, while this hobblings happen and, Sheriff Buster, he finds the car that belonged to, Paul, and they raise it up, they get it out of the ditch. They have a press conference where your boy JT Wall shows up, even though he wasn't credited. And he's convinced, that Paul's still gotta be alive. He just, starts doing his investigation more, and he starts looking around, and then he's doing, library research, reading old newspaper articles, and rechecking earlier police records about superfans. And Annie's name resurfaces up about it. And this kind of gives it like a Hitchcock vibe to the film. And he intentionally drew these parallels to small town detectives that uncover like big secrets, like in Psycho. Reiner has said publicly that he kind of did that for his film. Did you get kind of that vibe?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about it that way until you just pointed that out, but I can see that.
And also you get his agent keep calling, and it's kind of pushing, this pressure. He even goes with a helicopter that Paul sees fly over. And I think it's when he's pissing when it happens, right? When
Yeah.
she's like telling him about like how she would never be with a guy, and then she's like swinging around. No, it's
And
when
he's just like, he just
yeah,
keeps looking.
just staring at her. And no, it's actually when she burns the book. But
Yeah, it
no,
was right after that.
he yeah, just that scene too that when you mentioned where he uses the bathroom in a bucket or like a
Yeah.
I don't know
Like
what it
a
is.
nurse thing, like
Yeah, like a
getting
nurse. He pisses in there, and she's like talking to him like nothing, and then he's like all done, and she takes the jug away from him, and she's talking about how she couldn't walk down the aisle with somebody while swishing around this thing of piss, and he's just like staring at her like you're one crazy lady. But at this time, Buster finally figures he's gonna go to the Wilkes house. And she kind of like she puts Paul in the basement. She basically throws him down the stairs. And he's like laying on the floor down there. And she's telling him to be quiet. The sheriff comes and he starts making noise for Buster. and Buster goes and opens the door and is
I love
like,
that door. I don't know if you,
yeah,
paid attention. It's like you can't tell it's there. He, like, has
yeah,
to, like, push it
push
and,
it,
like,
yeah,
press.
yeah. It's kind of like enclosed into the wall, like it's kind
Yeah.
of like hidden. He arrives and then like he goes in and he's like, Mr. Sheldon, and then she blows a big ass hole through his chest. And this was giving a lot of people shock value for his death in this, and it kind of made me feel sad a little bit for Buster dying there.
It sure did. I mean, poor Buster did not have to go out that way.
Yeah, and during this scene, the gun effects were used with squibs from Hollywood and safe distance gun recoil. Farnsworth's background and stunts allowed him to take the hit convincingly. So old man Rich, he took it like a champ. After she shoots good old Buster and she walks down the stairs, her and Paul have this conversation.
You see, I've known for some time why I was chosen to save you. You and I were meant to be together forever. Now our time in this world must end. But don't worry, Paul. I've prepared for what must be done. I put 2 bullets in my gun. One for you and one for me.
And she tells him like she's gonna kill him, but he convinces her. He's like, "No, we have to finish the story. We have to finish the story." And she's like, "Okay." So Paul finishes the story the way she wants it, and he's like, she's like, "Oh, do you want your cigarette and your champagne?" And he's like, "No, get 2 cigarettes and
She's
2
like,
glasses of champagne, because this
"Oh,
book's about you as well."
oh,
And she's
wow."
like, "Oh my god, oh wow." And she goes out. He grabs a piece of a manuscript, which cracks me up. And he's like, "You're never gonna find out." And she comes back, "You're never gonna find out if Misery marries this person or if she ever meets her father." And starts to light the paper on fire from the gasoline he found in the basement.
Paul, you can't!
Why not? I learn it from you.
No, 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 not misery! Not my misery! No, not my misery!
And that part always cracked me up because when she's out there banging on the floor to try to stop the manuscript from being on fire, he picks up the typewriter that he had been working out with, and he like smashes her in the head, and she just falls on the floor like, oh. Then she attacks him, and they basically get into a struggle where he trips her, and she hits her head on the typewriter, killing her, and ending this crazy battle of Paul and
I
Annie
like when
Wilkes.
he's shoving the paper down her throat,
Yeah, yeah,
and he's like, "Choke on it, you stupid."
yeah. He was.
Oh, he was
Mailman
pissed.
Jack says the book is so freaking scary, and you know what? Like even watching it today, even though I know the ending of it, it's very like she does a great job in her
Sure.
portrayal of getting those emotions to you. We then cut forward to 18 months later. We're in New York. We see Paul and his agent are talking. They're at a restaurant. He's written a new book and it's gone real, real big. People are actually complimenting him on his new book. Uh, but he's not doing his ritual anymore. He's not doing champagne and the cigarette anymore. And you kind of figure it's probably from the trauma that is going on. And his literary agent asked him, "Hey Paul, why don't you write a book about what happened in that house?"
Gosh, if I'd have known you better, I think you were suggesting I dredge up the worst horror of my life just so we could make a few bucks. I thought you were over. I don't know if anyone could ever totally get over something like that. It's weird. Even though I know she's dead, I still think about her once in a while.
Excuse me. I don't mean to bother you, but are you Paul Sheldon?
Yes,
I just want to tell you I'm your #1 fan.
that's very sweet of you.
Yeah, and I love the hallucination he has when she's walking up with a knife as the waitress is walking up, and he's talking about how he sometimes sees her. Uh, he definitely has PTSD, and I think it's kind of like his agent's kind of a bitch, like asking him, "I thought you were over it." it's only been 18 months. The guy was like tortured for like God knows how long from this crazy lady, and he had to kill a person to get out. And he saw another guy die. Uh, you know, I don't even. Did the pig survive, Tony? That's all I want to know. Did the pig survive?
Well, you start to think about it. I mean, if at the very least, Kathy Bates was just a kind person, and she saved him, and he got to leave, he would have probably set her up for life.
Yeah, but she turned out to be a fucking psycho.
Well, that's the problem. That's the little stick in the movie.
But do you think the pig survived? Did Misery survive?
Yeah, I think the pig has to be. It'd be cool if there was like Khan took the pig in.
I love the fact that you call him this last like Khan took the pig in.
Khan took the pig in instead of like Wrath of Khan, like the way they say Khan.
You talk too much about Annie Pig.
You blabbed about Mars, Quaid.
No, but it's an excellent ending to the film as we cut to the credits, and we have Mark Shaman's closing theme. The score is awesome for the film. I know you talked about a little bit, but there was some like little trivia nuggets here that I want to add in. Kathy Bates had some frustration with James Caan. Bates came from a stage background, of course, so she was used to really rehearsing a lot. And James Caan was like, I don't want to rehearse. I want to keep everything fresh. And just kind of like pissed her off because she's a perfectionist. And, it's kind of like the two people that do their job differently. But I mean, luckily it worked out. William Goldman's personal fear. Goldman has stated that Misery touches on the primal fear of fans' entitlement and the writer's sense of isolation. The film adaptation captures these elements with Rob Reiner referencing real-life obsessed fans in Hollywood. Also in wrestling, if you haven't heard, Asuka has asked fans to stop proposing to her
I just seen that
at airports. So it's not just in writing. Also, they want, like I said, the hobbling versus the cutting off of the foot. They wanted to keep it to the hobbling because of the rating. And King actually supported the change because he didn't know if the audience would accept, somebody getting their foot cut off. This is pre-Hostel, and Audition didn't come out till 9 years later. So people also want to know, what was Annie Wilkes's name origin? Like, where'd it come from? Some fans suggest Wilkes references Wilkie Collins, a 19th century writer of suspense fiction, and King has not confirmed. So he doesn't want to tell anybody where the name came from, but some people believe it was Wilkie Collins, a 19th century writer of suspense fiction stories. I just found that interesting because who the hell did that much research to find out where Annie Wilkes' name came from? Like, it was there, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting that somebody actually, or people actually went through the deep dive. But then there's those crazy fans that ask about cartoons when, I think The Simpsons does a great episode of it where when he's Poochie and the guy's like, you played a xylophone this way, and did you expect us to believe this? And he's like, what the hell is that? It's just crazy with the obsessed fans. But what are your final thoughts of the film, Tone?
I heard something within the last 10 years that I actually didn't really know about it when I would watch it all these times when I was young, was that, Stephen King dealt with addiction, pretty heavily. And with him having dealt with addiction, it's pretty interesting that the movie itself, Annie Wilkes, they have said is kind of like a synonym for cocaine, his cocaine use that he had. And, when you think about it like that, Annie Wilkes being pretty much a subject of a drug like cocaine in which King was addicted, you can see then in the movie her personality going up and down and all of that. And pretty much the snow in the movie was supposed to kind of relate to that drug also. Pretty much the whole movie, and then the title Misery, it was really supposed to be a synonym of being deep under the addiction of cocaine. So I always found it very interesting if you take a step back and look at it like through those angles and what King was going through at the time. it adds like this other really crazy layer to the movie, which I love when movies are like even deeper for like especially the writer, because if you have ever studied addiction or known anybody and then you watch this movie and you're like, well, yeah, wait a minute, that's what kind of this movie is. And Khan is just like along for this ride that he never signed up for, pretty much. It's very interesting movie in a lot of different fronts. I've watched it so much that I pay attention to like the pictures on the wall in Annie's house, that like in the kitchen when like he's like getting the knife. There's just so many interesting parts to the movie. I just find it to be an acting tour de force.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, theory that you had there. I could see that King was also like a big time alcoholic, which is why The Shining kind of like told a lot of his stuff. And I think Cujo, he was so coked up and passed out from drugs and alcohol, he doesn't even remember writing Cujo.
Yeah.
But really, really good stuff, man. This is the creme de la creme of King adaptations. And then, we just did one earlier for our first show, which is a Shawshank Redemption, which is a short story. This one's based off a full novel. Annie Bakes. Kathy Bates knocks it out of the ballpark with her performance here, and James Caan is a great secondary character, even though he is the lead. But she kind of like she basically makes you glued to the screen when watching her. Like you're mesmerized. She cultivates your attention, and she makes sure that you're on her the whole time. Their eyes are on her, watching her, which I think is what villains and those characters are supposed to do, and she does it perfectly.
Great job.
Yeah. So let's get into how the critics received this film and a crazy fan theory, my friend.
Ooh, I'm excited.
You know that fat cocksucker says I look like the Shah of Iran?
Who does? Tony. I never got that at all.
That one always cracks me up. So Misery made $60 million at the box office with a $20 million budget. So it grossed pretty decently at the box office, a 3-1 box office there. Kathy Bates, of course, went on to win the Academy Award for Best Actress, making this the first and so far only major Oscar win for any Stephen King adaptation, which is kind of crazy. Shawshank was nominated for, I believe, 7 or 8 awards. Didn't win any, which is crazy. Misery was adapted for the stage multiple times. One notable Broadway version starred Bruce Willis as Paul and Laurie Metcalf
so bad
as Annie in 2015 through 16. Metcalf was praised, but the production closed after a limited run. Now, Laurie Metcalf is a very, very talented actress. I think in The Conners, her character of Jackie kind of gets downplayed because she's more goofy. But in the earlier seasons of Roseanne, like she can pull your heartstrings really, really well.
I love she was married to the ball boy in Fred from Caddyshack. He played the head ball boy in that movie. But Jackie was great on that show. Laurie Metcalf is even really good as Andy Garcia's partner in Internal Affairs. She's got some really early movie roles. She kind of pops in here and there too. I like her.
Yeah. She another like great character. And also she's from Illinois. So shout out to
there we go. Yeah.
Our girl Laurie Metcalf. So let's get into these positive reviews. The first one is from Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. This was written in 1990, November 30th, 1990. He says, it's a good story, a natural, and it grabs us, but it is not an entirely horrifying film, or at least not horrifying in the usual ways. He gave it a 3 out of 5, praising Kathy Bates' performance and Rob Reiner's direction. He noted how the film builds tension through psychological unease rather than traditional horror jump scares. And that's why people didn't know how to market it. Janet Maslin of the New York Times wrote this on November 30th, 1990. Misery is both blackly funny comedy and a tense psychological thriller, all topped by Kathy Bates' cunning performance. She again highlighted the balance of dark humor and suspense, commending Bates' ability to switch seamlessly between sweetness and a menace. She also remarked on how claustrophobic setting intensifies the film's atmosphere. Variety, their staff, wrote this review on November 28th, 1990. While there's no shortage of tension, there's always a sly sense of humor that enlivens the claustrophobic scenario, thanks in large part to Bates's fearsome presence. They underscored the film's blend of terror and very comedic moments. They loved that. They also credited Kathy Bates' Oscar-winning turn for evaluating what could have been a standard thriller into something more memorable. So mixed and negative reactions. We have Hal Henson of the Washington Post. He wrote this and the same. All these people wrote this on like the same day, November 30th, 1990. Despite the strong performances, the film never quite reaches the pitch of horror it promises, and the comedic elements sometimes undermine the intended menace. Henson praised James Caan and Kathy Bates, but felt the film stopped short of delivering full-blown terror. He believes some lighter touches distracted from darker potential of Stephen King's story. Do you agree with that?
No.
Vincent Canby of the New York Times, in more of a critical strand of his review, he says the film is carefully directed by Rob Reiner and is well acted by the entire cast, but it isn't the roller coaster ride it wants to be. Though he acknowledged the craftsmanship, he argued Misery lacked the unrelenting thrills one might expect from such a premise. He suggested the adaptation was cleverly manipulative, but not as emotionally forceful as the very best King films. Which I'm like, okay, what were the best King films? Stand By Me?
Well, I mean, he's got to be, he's got to be talking about previous, you know,
Shining.
Yeah, there you go.
I guess. Destin Howe of the Washington Post says Misery is a compromise, a tense and a really good tease at that. But so was King Kong.
Who is this guy? Is this guy even working anymore? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Destin Howe used his analogy to illustrate that while Misery excelled at building suspense, it could feel like it was holding back from something even more harrowing. His review will still seem somewhat positive overall, but he framed the film as deliberately teasing viewers rather than plunging them into outright horror.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell he's talking about, King Kong. Like, I don't get that reference.
That's so stupid sounding.
That was over my head. The cultural impact reinforcing Stephen King's cultural footprints, showing that he still is the king of supernatural horror and the king of non-supernatural horror at the time. Tony says, I always saw a weird alternative parallel to this movie and Groundhog Day. Mailman Jack, what?
That's interesting.
Mailman Jack, we gotta have you on to explain that.
No, we're good.
This is one of King's definitive. I can't say it, Tom. Definitive. God, my stutter's bad. My pronunciation. I'm sorry about that. One of his definitive King adaptations. Misery is consistently cited along The Shining, Carrie, Stand By Me as a top tier adaptations of King's work to go along with Shawshank Redemption. And again, it's the only film of King's to win an Oscar. I'm laughing because if you're not watching this show, Sam just put a comment up saying King Kong didn't come out to 2005. The man was too early. Which is the other the critics thing we just talked about. Annie Wilkes is an iconic villain. She symbols an obsessive fandom, and she the whole moniker #1 fan kind of shows this. Her role was deeply complex female villain that has been examined by film scholars. We are not film scholars. Some highlight her as an example of how women's rage and mental health issues can be depicted from death and nuisance, while others critique the negative stereotyping of a female caregiver turned becoming a monster. So I don't agree with that a female caregiver becoming a monster. I think Annie always was a monster, and she was just kind of hiding her true intentions.
That's what I was asking. That was my question earlier. That's like she was just like a a spider in a web waiting for a bug to come
I
in.
mean, she tells him when she first catches him, like, I would go by, and we know you're going by the lodge. I would just go by there and stare
Oh,
out your window
that's
and
right,
like
yeah.
watch you right and wonder what you were doing. And then, I followed you home. And he's like, what? And she kind of like pushed the conversation along to where he didn't notice it. But
Well, it makes
she's
you
nice.
think that like, not that she could have, but, like, did she run him off the road even? Like, that's sometimes I've thought
Yeah,
about
I
that
was thinking
too.
that too. But when I watched the scene over again, like, it like he was just really, really bad snowstorm. I'm pretty sure she fell behind him. Yeah, he was driving in a similar way. Um, Annie Wilkes frequently appears in rankings of the cinema's greatest antagonists. The American Film Institute included her as its AFI's 100 Years, 100 Villains of Heroes and Villains list. Crazy stuff. One of the big scenes that it's always lasting in infamy is the hobbling scene, which is referenced in other shows such as South Park, Family Guy. I think The Simpsons had it as well. The term hobbling itself became synonymous with brutality. It has entered casual usage, referring to physically crippling somebody in a story. And cockadoodle and Annie's old lexicon. Euphemisms like cockadoodle or dirty birdie have become pop culture memes, showing up in comedic sketches, or social media references when somebody playfully mimics an unhinged yet prim manner. They were filming Ice Road Truckers. That's a great shot of her at the
Yeah,
Oscars.
definitely.
Again, this brought a change to the genre of thrillers. You didn't have to be uh, gory, although it had some gore with the breaking of the hobbling. It more emphasized on character growth and being a menacing character than it did on the actual killing and gore of her deeds. I think it's something that was really, really different than we had in the past. So, like, what's another film that kind of fits that description? Something that's built basically on like more of the character than the goriness of his actions.
Oh, I mean can't you say that? I mean, I'm just taking because I haven't thought much about it, but I mean, what are the goriest actions of, like, Jack Torrance?
Yeah, I mean, he does hit that guy with the the axe, but that's pretty much it.
Well, I mean, she hits him with the sledgehammer, so but, like, besides
Mhm.
that, they're, like, literally it's they're unraveling their mental state that's making the viewer go, "Oh, we gotta stay away from this person." That could be scary in itself.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever seen the movie with, Jake Gyllenhaal, Nightcrawler, where it's just you see his face and you already know he's unhinged and you feel kinda scared sometimes like that.
Yeah, another film that kind of Falling Down
Yeah, that's a good one too.
doesn't really have it has like some violence in it, but it's mostly based on like him basically going ape shit,
Yeah.
like mentally breaking down. Uh, the film paved the way for claustrophobic two-person stories, The Collector, Hand Candy, illustrating how a contained setting can enhance terror, and it also had like a on-screen dynamic for influencing that kind of stuff, of like Captor and Captive, the 10 Cloverfield Field Lane film, which used the confined thing and the, set an unstable host that kind of like inspired it. Directors have cited misery when discussing close quarter suspense. Its blueprint is apparent in many psychological horrors that pivot around an unstable caretaker figure. So, how was it impacted on the public perception of fans and celebrities? Misery syndrome in pop discourse. Media commentators occasionally reference misery syndrome or Annie Wilkes effect when describing obsessive fans. So, Annie has now made her own syndrome who
Ooh.
blur boundaries between reality and fiction. I would say Chapman. I probably would fit that. Mark Chapman.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Dialogue about fans communities grew, especially in the 2000s, and beyond misery was frequently invoked. An extreme cautionary tale about fans who force creators to rewrite stories they're liking. So a lot of fan fiction is written about this. Again, we have the stage and the Broadway plays that were played on this, and then the frequent parodies and homages that have happened with this film. So it's really, really inspirational.
before you get to, the next thing on the Saturday Night Live, because I've been waiting to tell you this. I don't know if you remember this. It was great. I wish you could find the episode. She headlined Saturday Night Live when this movie came out, and they spoofed Misery, which was amazing because Dana Carvey was the one who played James Caan. And like I'll always remember, like they like showed his legs, and they were like these fake like turns. It was just hilarious. It's a great scene if you get an opportunity to check it out. I haven't seen it since a long time, but just really, it was cool for the time.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. This is the only Oscar that Kathy Bates has ever won.
Crazy
stuff. I mean, she was nominated for Primary Colors and About Schmidt, as well as Richard Jewell. She was for Best Supporting Actresses. She just never won.
Pretty good movie.
Yeah. But here we go, man. I gotta clear my throat for this one, so excuse me for listening to the audio version. But this is a theory that I was like, what the hell? So this theory is from Reddit, fan theory Reddit, and it is by Delicious Library 696. And this theory is titled Elf is a sequel to Misery. It starts off with, "Hi everyone, if you are reading this, I'm about to go into full detail on my ultimate thesis. I'm sure many of you out there have seen or are familiar with the Christmas classic Elf. If not, where have you been?" Then he gives us a warning that there will be spoilers if you have not seen either of these films. Anyway, Elf is about a human named Buddy, played by Will Ferrell, who has been living in the North Pole all his life. After 30 years, he discovers he's not an elf after all. He has been a human all along, and he has a dad named Walter Hobbs, played by James Caan, who works as a children's book editor at the Empire State Building in New York. So Buddy then decides to leave the North Pole and go to New York to meet his father. But years before this holiday classic was even a thought, actor James Caan starred in the thriller Misery in 1990, based on the Stephen King novel. A successful novelist named Paul Sheldon, played by Caan, best known for his Misery book series, had just finished the final book in the Misery saga. He leaves the Silver Creek Lodge and drives through the snowy Colorado mountains on his way to New York to publish the manuscript of the final book. But on his way, he gets caught in a snowstorm and his car goes off a cliff. Now, before I continue, he didn't finish the final book of Misery. He actually finished a new book that he was writing that me and Tone talk called Fast Cars, which was more of like, I guess, an up and coming about mobsters or something. Like it didn't really get into detail, but it had like street kids and stuff in there that he had been doing.
I was a street kid.
Yeah, I was one of them. But on his way, he gets caught in a snowstorm and his car goes off a cliff. Not long after, he is saved by a woman named Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates, and she tells him she is his #1 fan. She manages to convince him to let her pre-read the manuscript of his new Misery book. Again, it wasn't a Misery, it was Fast Cars. She reads it all the way through, but was unhappy with the book's ending. The next morning, she forces him to burn the entire manuscript and write a new story called Misery's Return. So now that we have covered all this, let's break down the connection between Misery and Elf and explain their similarities. Both films star James Caan. In Misery, he plays this novelist, and in Elf, he plays the workaholic children's book editor, Walter Hobbs. So now that I've introduced the two characters, let's go into depth on these two characters played by James Caan and what they have in common. For starters, both characters have a career in the book business. In Misery, Paul's a writer and is known for his Misery book series. In Elf, Walter Hobbs works as a children's book editor at the Empire State Building. New York, in Misery, Paul lives in New York, and in Elf, Walter not only lives in New York, but he works at the Empire State Building. Hobbs and hobbling. In Misery, Annie eventually finds out that Paul has snuck out of his room and makes sure that doesn't happen again. She breaks his ankles, and in the operation was called hobbling. And Elf, his name is Walter Hobbs. Also near the end of Elf, there's a moment where Walter is wearing Santa's suit, trying to distract the Central Park Rangers, and it sort of looks like he's slightly limping. Is it just me? It's fairly quick, so it's hard to tell. I don't know. He probably tripped over something, but I don't know. But Number 4, he says, father and son moments and traits. In Misery at the start of the film, Paul gets ready to leave the Silver Creek Lodge on his way back to New York. The hood of his car is covered in snow. He takes some of the snow off his car and curls it and throws it in a little ball as it hits a tree branch. In Elf, we see that Buddy is a snowball fighting pro. In Misery, near the end of the film, before the big fight between Paul and Annie, we hear Paul calling for Annie through the closed door. In Elf, Buddy calls Walter through a closed door, like father, like son. In Misery, we hear Annie Wilkes refer to herself as Paul's number 1 fan. And at the end of the movie, Paul has another number 1 fan encounter with a waitress at the restaurant. And who knows? He probably encountered many other crazy number 1 fans later in life. In Elf, when Walter meets his son Buddy, the elf, for the first time, he becomes very suspicious about him. He doesn't trust Buddy and acts very unwelcoming towards him. And he might be thinking to himself, maybe he's just another number 1 fan trying to get my attention. At one point in Elf, after bailing him out of jail, Walter gets physical with Buddy and throws him against the wall. I think it's safe to say, after Paul's experience with being with Annie Wilkes and getting another number 1 fan, he has never been the same after. Would anyone be? Aftermath between Misery and Elf, Paul becomes overwhelmed by the intensity of number 1 fans and their infatuation with his books. It becomes too much for him, so he eventually decides to start over. He changes his identity, changes his name from Paul Sheldon to Walter Hobbs. He also makes the decision to quit writing books and becomes a children's book editor for the Empire State Building, and his story continues in Elf. So there you have it. All the definitive proof that Elf is indeed a sequel to Misery. Thanks for checking this out. Merry Christmas to you all. Tone, what do you think about that theory?
That was some good stuff in there. The snowball fighting hitting the tree and him being a snowball fighting.
He was stretching. He was stretching hard.
I like it, but I like a good stretch.
The only thing he didn't mention was that Paul has a daughter in Misery.
Oh, yes.
Remember, he wanted to call her for her birthday. That's true. He didn't get a chance to call her. So maybe he just wrote her out of his life. He left her. I don't know. But I thought that was pretty funny. This guy tried to say Elf was a sequel to a Misery. Tone.
Oh yeah. Really, really ridiculous.
So that is our complete breakdown of Misery. It was a fun one, Tone. I even though I got a little tongue tied in some of the stuff, a lot of information out there, lots and lots of stuff out there. What'd you think about the whole movie and like the stuff that we went over?
Well, you could call us pretty much. No, you know what I wouldn't say it anyway. You can call us. We're like the John Holmes of a film podcast. We go deep. And that being said, is that you have. Here we go. My favorite quote.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
And tonight was no exception because really Misery is another Rob Reiner classic along with Stand By Me and his other ones. And as you stated, I mean, I just am glad that we were able to showcase Kathy Bates. I mean, we talked about James Caan before on the show, but Kathy Bates' great performance, and because we have the Oscars coming around the corner, this was an excellent expose and a great performance and a great movie.
Yeah, definitely a great film. She definitely deserved the Oscar for it. Exceptional actor. She's playing Matlock now on TV.
Yeah. I watched the first episode of that too, and I'm not gonna lie, it was a good time. I gotta get around to the
I'm
rest
sure it was. That wasn't like this at her. I think she's great in everything she does. I mean, in comedy, I mean, she was great in The Waterboy when that movie wasn't great, but she was awesome in it as the mom. She was good in The Blind Side. She was his tutor in The Blind Side. About Schmidt, she's awesome. She's a great actress. She also did another film. What was it? Dolores Claiborne, another
it was a good one.
Stephen King film that was very good. So, if you haven't seen Misery, she just won a Critics' Choice Award for Matlock tonight. See, Sam Reeves, breaking news. Great job, Sam. Kathy Bates just won a Critics' Choice Award for Matlock tonight.
It's like when we go live to the event and he's like the reporter out there and he's like, yes, we've got Kathy Bates just won. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Live from Sam Reeves' bed as he's bedridden. But yeah, this film, propelled her into superstardom and well deserved with the performance. I mean, that's crazy that your first big film, you knock it out of the ballpark and you win an Oscar.
Yes, very crazy.
But that is Misery. That's our breakdown. Let's get into what is coming soon, my friend. If I can find the graphic. I always mess up with the graphics. So here we go.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Coming soon.
Próximamente.
Coming soon.
Coming soon.
So
what we got coming up is something that you aren't going to believe. We have an actor with such great movies as Random Hearts and Sabrina. No, I'm just kidding. He did make those movies, but next week for Valentine's Day, we're going to talk about the legend Harrison Ford, a 5 and 5. Great movies, which I'm looking at his list here. Lots of good ones in honor of him being in the brand new Marvel movie that is also releasing next Friday, Captain America. So it's going to be a good time.
Yep. I'm looking forward to going to some Harrison Ford movies. I'm going to try to pull some that are not well known. I know you are as well.
Oh, yeah.
Great actor. Has a long, prolific career. We'll be doing some Harrison Ford 5 and 5s this next week coming up. Also, we'll be going into another week of the At the Mini Show where we talk all entertainment news from video games to TV to movie news, anything that is in the entertainment realm. We cover at least 6 or 7 stories each episode, about 30 to 45 minutes sometimes. Sometimes less. The episode may be around 30, but it's under an hour. Me and Tone just spitballing about what's going on in the entertainment world. Check that out. We release them. Mostly they'll be out before Friday morning. We try to release them. Sometimes it's Tuesday or Friday morning. So check out the schedule. It depends on what's going on at work for both of us that kind of prevents it. But we're trying to get that extra content out there for you guys. That's not just one film based focused or one actor per se. We want to get what's going on in the real time. So check those out on the Statistic Penguin Studios YouTube as well as on where you get your podcast, Tone.
A lot of good stuff that we've covered on there. Tonight, actually, before coming on the show, one of the topics that we covered, I believe, on episode 2 of At the Mini Show, we were talking about Robert Edgar's new movie, Werewolf, I think it was called. And he just stated today that this is going to be his scariest by far outing, he says, and he's going to be specifically, I think it says it's taking place in like the 15th century, but the language is even going to make sense into this for that time too. Scorsese, who we love, also stated today that, man, Robert Edgars is a legend. So I'm excited for that, and keep out for all these news stories that we talk about because we're going to keep it up.
Yes, sir, we are. Also, before we get to the Sugar Baggies soundtrack pick of the week, Tone, let everybody know what's going on at the Hookup on Music, my friend.
Just a little while ago, before coming on the show, I recorded my 105th episode of At the Hookup on Music, which is going to be, we got some new bands that we discuss on here, a really, really awesome brand new Polish indie rock band, which I have not heard of too many bands from Poland, which was really cool to dig into. We also talk about such great bands as Them Crooked Vultures. We talk about Stephen Stills. We also talk about a recent concert of David Gray and Guster and so much more. So that's going to drop tomorrow sometime during the day. So keep your eye out for that.
Yes, and also check out It's Getting Drafty in here. He just had a ridiculous draft with Baloney from Chicago Sports Bums and Steve Niss. They drafted films where you keep one character as a real person and the other characters as Muppets. We watched it. It was hilarious. He picked one of them was Bloodsport.
Great.
Pulp Fiction was picked, so check them out. Yeah, it'll be, Brian did a great job on that. And Mr. Hand released a new collector's corner with some goodies that were really awesome. So shout out to Mr. Hand for releasing his goodies he's been releasing. He got a new bat. I know he had some hockey apparel that he got signed, as well as a Chelios, I think jersey he got signed that was awesome. Check out like Mr. Hand Collector's Corner on the Six Penguin Studios on YouTube. That's only a video version because he shows you what he has. So you go along for the ride with Pete, and Pete's a great storyteller for one and awesome dude. So be sure to check that out on our network. With that tone, let's go straight into the Sugar Baggy soundtrack pick of the week to close out this show, my man.
Let's do it.
The Sugar Baggy soundtrack pick of the week.
Before I say what it is tonight, I'm going to ask you a little trivia because with you throwing around all this animation, I had to come up with some kind of animation. And I don't know why I always go to this 1981 animated film that has an amazing heavy metal hard rock soundtrack. Do you know what it is?
Heavy metal.
You got it. I gave it away right there. It is the one and only heavy metal. Man, first of all, I don't know if I should be sharing this on here, but a long time ago when I used to look for magazines I shouldn't be looking for in my dad's, I found a heavy metal magazine like fell out, and it was just like cartoons, and I was like, why is this in there with that? And then later I realized that they did show some things inside the cartoon version of that magazine. But the movie itself from 1981, if you could tell by that little clip that I just played, very cool graphics for the time, and an actual excellent voice cast. You got John Candy, Eugene Levy, really, really excellent. But now you even get to the soundtrack. I mean, when you're talking about Devo, Blue Oyster Cult, Cheap Trick, Don Felder, who's from the Eagles, Donald Fagen, Sammy Hagar, Black Sabbath, Trust, Stevie Nicks. You're talking about a soundtrack that is just excellent. I mean, Journey's Open Arms, which I know wasn't made for the soundtrack, but it appears on here, is just really great. One of my favorite songs of all time is Devo's Working in a Coal Mine. A great, great cover that only comes in at 2 minutes and 48 seconds. I still have here in my possession the 8-track, which to me is just a cool thing to have because, again, the soundtrack is really awesome. I mean, Black Sabbath, 1981 on a movie soundtrack, sign me up.
Yeah, and Sam Reese says they did a parody on that on South Park. It was great.
Awesome.
The only thing that kind of kills this is it has Journey in there.
Don't talk bad about Journey's Open Arms. That's a good song right there. Now I'll give you this with Journey. Are you ready? I'll give you Don't Stop Believing. That song stinks. But
I never liked Journey. My parents used to listen to Journey.
But like when someone says, they see, like, I listen to so much music. When someone says they don't like Journey and Journey has like 10 albums, you can't tell me you can't find 10 songs that you're going to be like, okay, I can like.
You know what? I think it's because I don't really like Steve Perry's voice, I guess. And like, maybe because my parents. Yeah, but there's a lot of people who have 10 albums
but like
there.
you can find songs that you like. Like if you like any art, like right, like I know you like a lot of different kind of music personally.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think like, have you spent time listening to like deep cuts? Probably not, because you don't like Journey that much. But like if you did, you'd be like, well, okay, this song I guess isn't as bad as these ones that I've heard all the time with his voice, so to speak.
Well, Wheel in the Sky I heard so many times. Maybe it's Journey fatigue.
These are killer songs, man. I mean, like killer, like they played them so much. Wheel in the Sky, Separate Ways.
Yeah,
you just keeps playing them and playing.
I hear it every time I go to a Sox game when they play it. Don't Stop Believing. Or
Don't Stop Believing, bad. But I mean, to outweighing Journey though, my man, is Devo, one of the greatest bands from the 80s.
Yeah, Blue Oyster Cult too. Blue Oyster Cola.
Get your Blue Oyster Cult tickets.
Yeah, I almost worked at 7-Eleven.
That'd be a good deep dive to do one day.
Yeah. Shout out to Richard Roper, who I almost called him Roger Ebert again, who did that callback to Fast Times on his Twitter. Good dude. But yeah, this Grand Funk Railroad's awesome. Black Sabbath, like he said, Trust, Stevie Nicks.
You
got Sammy Hagar in here. Cheap Trick, Chicago band. Nazareth, which I was like, wow, Nazareth's on here. And they do blues rock, which is kind of crazy stuff. So yeah, sweet album, Tone.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good
so
show.
Yes, sir. That is our show. We're over the 2-hour mark, Cotton. No, so we went over to her. I thought this was gonna be way longer than what we did. It's whoa, it's too close.
Keep doing this.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And my wife walked behind me. I was like, what the hell? Yeah, I saw my wife walk behind me there. But thanks again for checking us out. Be sure to check back next week for At the Mini Show. At the Mini Show episode 4 is out. And check out the Hookup on Music, and it's getting drafty in here. And we will see you next week. Okay, good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the At the Show podcast, a Sadistic Penguin Studios production.
Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Maybe we could build a fire, sing a couple of songs, huh? Why don't we try that?